Welcome, and I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. I know it's crazy to have to give up another night at this time of year, but I really, really do appreciate it on behalf of the City of Rockville, of the council and staff, and everybody. I think this is a great opportunity for all of us to get together and have a conversation about the BRT. Welcome to the City of Gaithersburg, welcome to the County Council, and to all of our staff. I'm Bridget Newton, I'm the mayor, and if I could just real quickly go around the room and introduce Judd Ashman, Mayor of Gaithersburg, welcome, and Tom Street, filling in for our county executive this evening. Thank you for being here. And maybe if we could start with you, Councilmember Elrich, and just quickly run around the table.
Councilmember Elrich.
I'm Montgomery County Council President George Leventhal.
Oh.
Tom Street, sitting in for the county executive.
I'm Councilmember at Large Nancy Florine, Council Vice President.
I'm Sidney Katz. It's going to be tough for me to say. I'm Sidney Katz, and I'm on the County Council for Montgomery County.
Good job.
Representing District 3, which, might I add, is one of the nicest districts in all.
Nicest city, nicest district. Yeah.
I'm Robert Mulliner from the County Council, and I live with the chairing of Transportation Committee.
Ryan Spiegel, I'm the Gaithersburg City Council Vice President.
Judd Ashman, new mayor of Gaithersburg.
Henry Mareva, City Council, Gaithersburg.
Kathy Driscolla, Gaithersburg City Council.
Tom Moore, Rockville City Council.
Virginia Arnold, Rockville City Council.
Julie Polakovich-Carr, Rockville City Council.
Carol Feinberg, Rockville City Council.
Terry Kudowski, and John Capello, town party master. Amy Bell with the City of Rockville,
Thank you all so much for coming, and I'll now introduce Tom Street for just a few seconds, talk about
Thank you very much. Good evening. Mayors Newton, Mayor Ashman, members of the city councils. I'm Tom Street, an Assistant Chief Administrative Officer for County Executive Ike Leggett. Thank you for inviting us to appear before you this evening to brief you on plans to develop a state-of-the-art rapid transit system capability for the 355 corridor. It's a very timely meeting. On Monday, at the inauguration ceremony for the county executive and for the county council, Mr. Leggett made it very clear that transit was one of his top priorities. His commitment that he expressed in his speech could not have been more clear. We need to move forward now with development of a countywide rapid transit system, or RTS, and creating such infrastructure for the 355 corridor is one of his top priorities. Only through a 21st century system, such as RTS, will we be able to transform key destinations for people and businesses to grow quality jobs and expand an innovation economy in the county. A state-of-the-art transit network is essential to unlocking our county's economic potential and for the economic centers throughout the county. We know there will be challenges to getting the 355 corridor project and others like it built. That is why Mr. Leggett will recommend to the County Council for the creation of an independent transit authority for Montgomery County. The authority will not only be responsible for current ride-on transit operations, but will manage and finance development and operations of our planned rapid transit system. The authority will focus attention and resources on our growing transit needs as we compete for jobs, talents, and investments. Mr. Leggett and I look forward to working with all of you on creating a transit system that will benefit everyone in the county. With me tonight are staff from the county, city, and state that will brief you on various aspects of the 355 corridor activities.
Thank you so much. And Mayor Ashman.
First off, thanks to our friends here in Rockville for hosting this important meeting, and special thanks to County Executive Leggett and to the County Council for their foresight and continued support of this project. And I do want to mention, by the way, our colleague Mike Sesma is on the way, hung up in traffic on Rockville Pike Road.
Apropos.
He'll be walking in at some point. This is really pretty easy for us. The City of Gaithersburg has a long history of supporting multimodal transportation solutions, and when it comes to BRT, we've been on board from the beginning. 5 years ago, we started the conversation that led to citywide support for BRT along our 355 corridor. And as you'll hear from our staff, we included the BRT concept in the master plan element that includes 355 that we adopted back in 2010. As our city becomes denser, particularly in this area, and where we're trying to foster redevelopment, it promises to get even more urbanized and more dense. We need some way to move people around, and we really see BRT as essential to the future of Gaithersburg. So we all know that it's going to reduce dependency on single occupancy vehicles. We all know that it's going to provide a much needed link between Gaithersburg and Rockville and the county. We agree that it's a vital economic engine for the city and for Rockville and for the county, and a big building block for the future. So we're hoping we see some momentum here, that we're all in the room, and we need to keep it going. We're ready to work with all of you at the state level to bring funding and make sure they understand what a high priority it is for all of our jurisdictions. And we're eager to coordinate on the planning of it, and so we look forward to further work together, moving it ahead and serving the future of transportation in Montgomery County.
Thank you so much. And I know that we're all looking forward to talking about the opportunities that the challenges are providing us. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Orland, if you'd like to start. And everyone should have an agenda that was prepared by our staff, excuse me, at your place, along with some documents.
And if I could mention our council colleague, our new council colleague, Neil Harris, has just joined us.
Welcome.
And here comes, well, where's Mike?
And Mike's right
Oh,
And
there's Mike.
Welcome to you both.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to give you a little bit of background about the history of the planning of this system in Montgomery County, and then go into more detail about what our county master plans call for Maryland 355. This process started about 6 or 7 years ago when Councilmember Elrich, in his copious spare time, sat down with his staff and then ran around the county and said, BRT would work here, BRT would work here, and he came up with a system. The idea caught fire. The county executive liked the idea as well, and he took it the next step, which was to appoint a transit task force, which was staffed by Mr. Street, so it's appropriate that he's here speaking to the executive today. That group worked for a couple of years, actually it's still working at some degree, and Mr. Berliner and Mr. Eldridge were on that committee. And then about 2.5 years ago, the council directed our county planning board to develop a master plan, a formal master plan amendment, to incorporate BRT, to be able to identify the specific routes, the general station locations, some other important aspects about these routes, which we typically have for other facilities like this in our master plans. So the right-of-way width, whether we're adding lanes or not, whether the lanes were dedicated for BRT or not. And I'm going to see if this works. The very first slide, but just press this and something works. And there it is. Back up one. There we go. This is a map of the system that the council approved 1 year ago last week, November 26, 2013. It includes 82 miles of bus rapid transit over 10 routes. And if you include with that the Corridor Cities Transway, which has been master planned for decades, that's another 15 miles. So there would be a total of 97 miles of bus rapid transit in the county when this is all done. The routes we're going to talk about today, though, are two of them. We call the Maryland 355 North and the Maryland 355 South, which of all the routes, not including the Corridor Cities Transway, of all the new routes, was the most heavily subscribed in terms of patronage, in terms of the forecasts that have been done for it. The line runs basically from Clarksburg all the way down to Bethesda, with the potential extension to the District of Columbia. I won't go through all the details of these two lines, or this one long line, because that's the documentation you have in front of you. But just to point out that where you see on the next slide, let me skip another one. Here we go. This is the northern edge, the northern half of the line. This is Maryland 55 North. And where you see in yellow, from the center of Clarksburg down to Shakespeare Boulevard, which is the Milestone Shopping Center in Germantown, the east side of Germantown, that's merely buses running in mixed traffic. There's no special lanes for the buses. There's no dedicated right-of-way. There's no additional widening happening there. It's strictly to have the buses run there and to have fewer stops than a normal bus route would have, so it would be quicker in that respect. But everywhere else along this line, from Germantown down to Bethesda, the idea is there'd be at least one, if not two, dedicated lanes. In other words, the lanes would be either totally exclusively or mainly exclusively, if I can say that, for bus rapid transit. There are a couple of routes coming out of Germantown. One coming down from the Carter Cities Transitway goes from Wegmans, the shops in Seneca Meadows, east over to Shakespeare Boulevard and 355, and then down 355. The other actually continues down Seneca Meadows Parkway with a stop along the way in Seneca Meadows Office Park, and then has a stop on Goldenrod Lane directly adjacent to Montgomery College, Germantown. One of the nice things about this route is it actually stops at 2 of the 3 campuses of Montgomery College, and this is the first one. Then it continues on south on Observation Drive to the new hospital, Holy Cross, at Germantown, and the Hercules Pinckney Life Science Center. Then it comes down to Middlebrook Road, goes east a bit and back to 355 and rejoins the other route. Then continues south, again with a dedicated, at least 1 or 2 dedicated lanes for, well in this case 1 dedicated lane for BRT. And 1 dedicated lane, what that means is that there probably would be a center, in the center roadway there would be 1 lane which could either run southbound in the morning, northbound in the evening, or it could run both ways with passing areas. It could be one or the other. At the maximum, it may be that once Barry's study gets going and get more detail, we may not even be able to do that. But what the plans identify is what the maximum goal is in terms of the dedication of right-of-way, and the extent that the buses will be running exclusively in its own right-of-way, and also how wide the road will be widened. It continues south to the city of Gaithersburg boundary. There's stops along the way. I won't go through each one. And at that point, the county's master plan doesn't say anything about what goes on within the city of Gaithersburg, except the route, which would be on 355, the general station locations, and the fact that the intent is that there would be a dedicated lane or lanes for BRT. The right-of-way width is not identified. That's totally the city's purview there. We have no planning and zoning authority in the city, of course. And also it doesn't talk about whether or not the road would be literally widened by a lane or so. That's also something to be out of the city. So it continues on down with stops in Old Town and by Education Drive at Gaithersburg High School and down to Shady Grove and gets back into the county again for a short piece, then back into eventually the city of Rockville. And the same rules apply there. We don't identify the right-of-way width. We don't identify whether or not we're adding a lane to the roadway or not. We do say that there should be at least 1 dedicated lane. Then we get to Rockville and past the Rockville metro station and down to the south end of the city of Rockville, Twinbrook. And from that point south, the county's plan actually calls for 2 lanes to be added to 355, probably likely also in the center, although it's yet to be finally determined. And that would run all the way down to the Beltway. One short piece of that, part through White Flint, is actually programmed in the county's CIP. It's not going to happen for several years, but there is money set aside for the reconstruction of Rockville Pike within White Flint, and that section of the BRT would be built as part of that. Then we get to the Beltway, and the section south of the Beltway, we're back to 1 additional lane for dedicated lane, because the right-of-way there is much more constrained. All the way down past Cedar Lane and through NIH and Walter Reed down to Bethesda CBD, and ending at the Bethesda metro station. You'll see on the map, the second map in this handout, the one for Maryland 325 South Carter, that south of Bethesda there's some dashed red lines, dashed red line. What that means is that our county plan stops at Bethesda. However, the county plan also says the line can be extended down to Friendship Heights, but only if the District of Columbia makes a similar decision to have BRT within the district that would extend from that point down to either Georgetown or the Cathedral area, someplace well into the city. And if that happens, then this plan says, then just by flicking the switch, if you will, the plan does recommend there be dedicated lanes for BRT, not adding lanes in this section because it's a very constrained section, but probably then repurposing lanes for the BRT. That's Really, the work we've done to date, this project, Maryland 355, you can think of as one corridor now, is one of the two top priorities for funding with the state, and the joint letter that goes from the executive and the council periodically. The last letter that was sent out in March of last year, March of this year, it's not last year yet, March of 2014, identifies these two, and in the revenue increase the General Assembly passed in 2013, they set aside $10 million for studies of this corridor and US 29 in the eastern part of the county. And my understanding is of that 10 million, 6 million is for this study and 4 million is for US 29. That's not going to be enough to finish project planning. Barry will talk about that when he talks about the project planning study itself, but it gets us going and probably funds the process for the next 2 years. So with that, let me turn it over to Andy, who's going to talk about specifically what Rockville's doing within this corridor.
Okay, thank you, Glenn. And I think we're mic'd up here now as well, so we probably don't need to worry about that as much. Thank you very much. I'm just going to give you a brief overview of some of the activities occurring within the city of Rockville. And if I could borrow the clicker. First of all, I want to thank the county council. I know that when the plan was going through the planning process before adoption last year, we had folks from Rockville. I know our planning director, Susan Swift, and our public works director, Craig Simino, offered testimony. They suggested we probably maybe need a few more stops, a few more stations potentially along 355 in Rockville, and you responded in kind, so we appreciate that. And building off some of the remarks the mayor made, I know our mayor and council sent comments to county council last year as well and suggested more coordination, that we work together with the jurisdictions, and this is a good outgrowth of that. So we really appreciate that. There's been a lot of responsiveness, and we appreciate the efforts there. Just real briefly, 355 is really, really important to Rockville in a lot of different ways. It's a major spine that connects some major activity centers that we have in the city, starting with King Farm to the north, through Town Center, and then down to what we call the Rockville Pike segment, down to the Twin Brook Metro Station. And there's a lot of planning activity and a lot of studies that we're engaged with at the city right now that really kind of build off of what you're doing with the BRT plan. So just going to share a little bit about that over the next few minutes. Starting south, first of all, in what we would call our Rockville Pike planning area, and this just shows the BRT corridor with the identified possible station locations per the plan that Glenn was describing. When we talk about the Rockville Pike, it's really about a 2-mile segment in the city of Rockville that starts just south of the town center area around Richard Montgomery Drive and extends south to Twin Brook Parkway, roughly. And despite what you may have heard, and maybe despite some of your experiences on the Pike, we actually do have an adopted plan for Rockville Pike. The problem is it was adopted in 1989, so it predates the plan for BRT. So we've been in an effort to update the plan. The mayor and council has a draft plan right now that really involves a lot of different components. It's a land use plan, so it's trying to identify, what's the right land use configuration that we want to see along the corridor. Over the past couple of decades, a lot of the development is characterized more by buildings pushed back further away from the Pike, and in a lot of cases buffered by a large sea of cars, which is an indication of economic viability, but we think there's maybe a different land use configuration that fits the Pike a little bit better. And it also involves a transportation component. This is just a draft, the latest concept for the cross-section for the draft Rockville Pike plan, and I want to emphasize it's a draft, and most likely it'll change before it gets to its final iteration and final adoption. But basically, just in summary, it just envisions bringing buildings a little bit closer as redevelopment occurs along the Pike, bringing them closer to the corridor, so really narrowing that cross-section more than what exists out there today in a lot of blocks, and really narrowing the cross-section over what exists in the current 1989 plan as well. So it creates a slightly more narrow corridor from building face to building face. And importantly, for tonight's discussion, it identifies how we think we could accommodate BRT down the middle of Rockville Pike. Through a lot of different exercises with our planning commission and now with our mayor and council, we think we've identified a way to kind of squeeze in 2 dedicated lanes to build on what Glenn was saying would occur to the south. So two dedicated lanes in the middle with stations in the middle as well. So we think we found the space and could fit it within the state right of way to make that happen. But like I said, it's still in draft form. There's a whole series of work sessions and public hearings being conducted right now by our mayor and council. And there's a lot of debate right now about how to use that space between building face to building face and what's really the best use of the transportation space in there as well. So I'm sure that's going to evolve over the next couple of months. We also realize that time is of the essence, and Barry's going to talk about the overall corridor plan process for 355. So we realize that with that effort starting in 2015 and us not quite having a final readopted Pike plan, that there are some timing sensitivities there as well, and we recognize that. Moving on a little bit further up into the town center area, one area that has been another kind of focal point for us is how 355 would intersect with Veers Mill Road or Maryland 586 in what we call the mixing bowl, and also continuing further in past the mixing bowl into the town center area and actually eventually join up with the town center metro station. And obviously there's a lot of challenges as far as traffic congestion in the area. We have some guidance, not so much in terms of BRT, but in terms of other connections that we'd like to make in this area that we're going to try to build upon. The East Rockville neighborhood is actually at the top of that slide. And from a neighborhood plan adopted for East Rockville, there's a lot of reference about having pedestrian connections improved between that neighborhood and our town center area. Our plan for the town center master plan identifies how we should maybe build on some better and create some better pedestrian connections between town center and the metro station. So with all of these things in mind and recognizing the fact that the state has a pretty long corridor that they need to study, it's about 24 to 25 miles in length, we decided that it's probably in our best interest to maybe put some resources toward this and have the city really kind of roll up our sleeves and take a look at how would we make BRT work coming into the mixing bowl in front of the metro station and coming into town center in a way that kind of builds off of these connections that we'd like to make with the neighborhood to the north and between the metro station and the town center. So we're committed starting in 2015 to really get started with kind of a technical exercise to really kind of take a look at different scenarios to try to help make BRT work in this area, you know, recognizing the fact that the state and the county have to look at the overall corridor. But we're committed to working with the state and the county and identify some possible concepts that we could share with our mayor and council and see if things meet their blessing before we carry those on and kind of recommend those to SHA before they move on. It's a narrow corridor. 355 is pretty tight as far as buildings on the edge. We've got the WMATA property on the other side, so there's going to be a lot of constraints trying to get at least a single dedicated lane through this segment as well. It abuts a very major transit center, obviously, with a lot of transit service by WMATA, MARC service, even Amtrak provides service to the location. Very heavily used as far as bus ridership, and I think, in fact, it might be among the highest bus ridership destinations as far as boardings and alightings along the entire 355 corridor. So there's a lot of connections that would have to be made there as well. And I mentioned the pedestrian connections, that's something that we really want to build on. So we're committed to looking at how we can kind of make these pieces all kind of fit together to make BRT work, but also kind of build on some of the other assets we'd like to see as well as far as our various neighborhood plans. And finally, I'm just going to spend just a moment on this. Going to the north on 355, we don't really have any specific guidance as far as a master plan element to suggest what we should do as far as BRT going up to the north. But one area that I did want to mention is Montgomery College. We recognize, you know, as Glenn mentioned, that it's a major potential ridership destination, and with all the college campuses being connected, there's a lot of potential there. One thing that we do know is that right on the other side of 355 from Montgomery College, the Rockville campus, is the WMATA tracks. On the other side of that, we have the gas fields. We know that there's some really serious constraints in that area. So we haven't found any solutions yet. We've studied it in very conceptual ways, but haven't really found a way to identify how to get a corridor through that connection yet, but we're committed to working with the state and the county to try to make that happen. So with that was just a really quick run through, and I'm going to turn it over to Marty, and he's going to describe Gaithersburg.
Thank you, and thank you also to the County Council and to the City of Rockville for hosting this meeting tonight. We appreciate the opportunity we have to describe just a little bit about the Maryland 355 corridor through the City of Gaithersburg. Our corridor is, get it going. You'll see from the slide. Well, we have a 5-mile section of 355 that runs through the City of Gaithersburg. I'll start on the north with the Spectrum at Watkins Mill project. That you can see numbers are a little small to be able to read up there, but that's our furthest to the north black dot that you see up there, and that's right at the intersection, the new interchange with Watkins Mill. And then moving south, you see the Lake Forest Mall property with its potential redevelopment in the future. We see great things happening there. The other side of the road, the fairgrounds, and the rezoning of the fairgrounds to MXT and what possibilities might be there in the future. And then moving further south to the City Hall and Education Boulevard area, then Bower Park and Casey Community Center further to the south at Shady, right adjacent to Shady Grove there. So as you can see, we have a lot of very properties through this corridor. Moving to the south, you can see from the photos there, we have quite a bit of right-of-way. The south typical section is bounded by smaller, more individual parcels, a little less dense. It gives us more opportunities to get BRT through this area, but also a little bit more challenges with where to put stations and not necessarily as defined activity centers in those in this part of the corridor. Moving north to the north section, you'll also see quite a bit of right-of-way. We see no issues with getting the needed facilities through this area as far as needing additional right-of-way, depending on what exactly was being proposed. This typical section in the north is a little bit larger parcels, a little bit more dense developments, larger activity centers, more logical places for stops and those types of things. We do have a couple of areas where we see some significant constraints, and that most notably would be at the Father Cuddy Bridge and the cemetery property. And you can see in the bottom photo, it's a little hard to see from that small photo, but on the west side of the road there, we have the cemetery. As most of you will realize that we're not going to be moving a cemetery, so we have some right-of-way issues through that area. The bridge is most likely unfeasible to reconstruct, and will also lend some significant opportunities for some unique proposals through that area. So with that, I wanted to move just really quickly and talk about the history of the city of Gaithersburg and our support for BRT through the 355 corridor. In our 2009 master plan that was adopted in September of 2010, we envisioned an opportunity for BRT, and the plan more specifically states the city should work with the neighboring jurisdictions in studying the feasibility of bus rapid transit line on Maryland 355, further widening the multimodal network. So I think we had some foresight, looking forward to a meeting just like tonight, and got that in our plan. The plan was adopted, and we're still working under its visions today. Additionally, in the 2013 Frederick Avenue Corridor and Vicinity Development Capacity Study that was done by Sage Policy Group, funded by the city, recommendations specifically stated that BRT could be an economic development engine for the corridor. And more specifically in Chapter 4, it makes the statement that we should make policy and financial accommodations to endorse the bus rapid transit system, and goes on to say that bus rapid transit is considered a game changer for the corridor, and we very much believe that. In our 2013 comments regarding the county's functional corridors master plan, the city stated that we strongly request that the entire length of 355 within the city's corporate limits be included in the 355 South Planning Project route, providing service north of Montgomery Village in the city would support several existing and planned mixed-use communities that have been designed for transit orientation. So as you can see, we stand ready to support further efforts in BRT. We feel that we have unlimited possibilities through our corridor, very little constraints, and while we're not necessarily as far along as some of the areas through the city of Rockville in our planning process, we also think that that's a great opportunity to work with the state's planning process going forward. and we're ready to, staff stands ready to jump in and help in any way we can.
Thank you. Barrett, would you like to go next?
Sure.
Thank you very much. I guess what my role here is in this effort there is really to talk about SHA's project there, the Maryland 355 Bus Rapid Transit Study. And really what my goal for this presentation will be is to really explain what the goals are going to be of our project there, and kind of explain what that is. It's more of a new type of concept than maybe what a lot of people may think of project planning studies are that come from State Highway. First of all, here, just as a recap here, this is mainly a lot of the information that Glenn discussed earlier, just talking about where this project came from. And it basically generates from the countywide transit corridors master plan that was approved last year. So really what we're going to be doing is one of our first steps is just using this master plan, as long as working with the Rockville Pike and also with Gaithersburg, and to really kind of understand what work has come before us. That's really the starting point that we have to be able to move forward, to be able to look at things as such as where station locations could be. I'll look at the typical section type of investigations that have already been done, and to really kind of move that forward, that planning process. Basically, our role is to take that and the next step and really develop a project and develop concepts from that. So basically, how are we going to be doing this? Really, this is a big partnering effort here. We've already been working with Montgomery County Department of Transportation hand in hand there. We've also been working more, a little bit more with the city of Rockville, but we'll be expanding that to include Gaithersburg. There's other agencies we've been working with, obviously Maryland National Capital Parks and Planning Commission, and also with WMATA too. It's really definitely a regional type of discussion that's being had, and we're trying to make sure all stakeholders are involved. It's going to make sure that all types of decision points there, that we make sure that all the different input that's received there, as we kind of come to consensus there and look at how we're going to move forward with deciding what concepts to move forward with. If there's things that might be prohibitive, to maybe say, hey, it doesn't make sense to look at that any further. So really, we're going to be continuing this effort as we move forward through the project. So here's one of the things I think is one of the more interesting pieces of the presentation here that I'll be giving tonight. There's just to look at project comparisons there, and just as a brief project comparison, we just take a look at the Quarter Cities Transitway, the CCT, and also look at where we're moving forward with the BRT project. Is that the CCT is basically gone through a NEPA process, the National Environmental Policy Act. And basically in early to mid-2000s, that was part of a multimodal corridor study. That project was then broken out, and some additional alternatives analyses were performed on the current alignments to bring them up to snuff with the more recent master plans. We're also right now the CCT was also moved forward with having a locally preferred alternative decided upon, and have even moved forward towards a 15% design this past August. They're going to be moving forward towards getting what's we refer to as location design approval sometime in mid to late 2015. And so really, and this is mainly that's for the main 6-mile segment towards the south. And so they're going to be in the position to really move forward further into the design process, which they are funded for. The difference here between what that study is and what Maryland 355 BRT corridor planning study is, we're calling it truly a corridor planning study. It's really a precursor before you would get into an environmental type of study. So this is basically a long corridor, about 20 plus miles. And really what we want to do is the product that we're going to have is going to be a decision-making document, and really looking at what future phases could be included in the project development process. And if you look at the flow chart to the right of your slide there, kind of see how that may work there is that you may start this, we're really at the corridor planning where the 355 route shield is located. And moving forward, after corridor planning, we may come up with some alternatives that we can move forward with, and then use those towards potentially agreeing upon a locally preferred alternative sometime in the future there. So this is kind of really, we're at a different place than maybe where a project like the CCT has been, or is currently is. So what will you see in the Maryland 355 corridor planning study? Basically, when we go out, Joanna Conklin's going to be talking about our corridor advisory committees. We're going to be trying to, basically identifying the study area there, establishing a purpose and need, make sure that, all the stakeholders in the community agree upon why we're doing this project. That'll be a good foundation for later funding decisions that might need to be made in the future. Basically, we're going to be developing alternatives, taking that to the public to get feedback. Throughout that process there, we may be selecting alternatives for additional analysis. And also maybe, developing a final report there on what might move forward. One of the outcomes might be that, the whole 20-mile corridor, there might be consensus that there's an alternative throughout that whole corridor, but there might say, hey, maybe there's a 5-mile segment or 6-mile segment that's more important, that needs priority. Kind of like what's happened with the CCT, that there's a priority that's moving forward. So the good thing at this stage in using corridor planning is we have the flexibility to be able to kind of be able to explore those different possibilities. So those are some of the elements. So what will the scope of, kind of more the scope of work be? So basically, if you see here, we're really talking about, a lot of the work that we do through SHA and also through the Maryland Transit Administration. As we, our project development process lends itself towards NEPA, which was the National Environmental Policy Act, and also MEPA, which is the Maryland Environmental Policy Act. And so whether or not there's federal funding that's, pursued, or if this is something that's funded through the state or something locally there, as Mr. Street had mentioned earlier on, is that it's very important that this will be on a state roadway. And even though sometimes the NEPA process might be a little bit more cumbersome there, there are more requirements there as far as review times. A lot of those elements still exist within MEPA. Different permitting requirements there, different coordination with, say, agencies like the Maryland Historical Trust. So there are a lot of those same elements that still do exist, even if you're not going through a federal process. So that's one of the things that we'll be able to identify through our corridor planning study, is to be able to see what pitfalls lay ahead of us, what challenges there are, and be able to strategize on how to best attack those. We'll also be splitting the study into kind of 3 different stages. The first one will be more of a pre-alternatives analysis. It's going to be more of a brainstorming of concepts there with our, basically with our project team, our stakeholders, our local jurisdiction partners, and also with our CAC, basically our Citizen Advisory Committee members that we'll be working with. Basically, when we go through that process and we have developed conceptual alternatives there, we'll be able to do more of a detailed analysis. Basically using those typical sections that have been developed through all the master plans, and being able to see how those typical sections and those widths translate to more of like the design and proposed built environment. Being able to look and seeing how stormwater management might be able to be evaluated, what the actual impacts are once we start laying these out section by section throughout the corridor. When we're done with that, we would be developing final recommendations and a report, basically being able to determine what types of project would move forward there, if there's certain phases that have priority, and being able to work with all the different stakeholders and just seeing how that would be delivered. So after we're done with the corridor planning study, what's the next phase of project development? And this is really a guide there, and that's basically there's a lot of different ways that this could occur because of some of the basically, as Mr. Street was mentioning there, what the county executive wants to do in moving forward with the identifying an independent transit authority. There could be a lot of different possibilities, but some of the ways that we would be looking at detailed environmental technical analyses. Once we go through that process of identifying impacts, being able to make sure we work with our are partnering environmental agencies to basically secure permits there and develop mitigation strategies if those are needed. Being able to develop our detailed engineering and looking at maybe identifying a locally preferred alternative, whether that's for the whole corridor or for a certain section. Once you go through that, then you can look at your environmental documentation, which you'll see is the NEPA documents noted on the slide, and work forward towards preliminary engineering, which are some of the latter stages which you now see with the CCT project. So right now our schedule is, the overview is that we're looking at, obviously moving forward, working with our CAC groups once those are identified, and looking at our informational open house, tentatively looking at this coming spring. We would potentially be looking at a selection of alternatives to be retained for more of a conceptual study, maybe in the fall of 2015 after we get feedback from the CAC groups and that informational open house. Then we would also get into that, looking at those conceptual alternatives, development there, basically kind of laying those out in certain sections of the corridor to see what impacts and how that information will work. And also working through the alternatives and also final recommendations as we move into 2016. And maybe one more point just to make there is one of the early things that we're doing with the project is we're doing a lot of traffic studies to see how the vehicular traffic will operate. We're also performing ridership analyses there. And it's really kind of meshing those together there because you basically have a transit system and a roadway system working in tandem. So that's a lot of the preliminary work that we're working on right now and we'll be developing as we move into 2015.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Janica?
Thank you. Well, I wanted to start by thanking the City of Rockville for organizing this meeting. I think as all the previous presentations have shown, the coordination of the jurisdictions and all the agencies is going to be really important going forward with this study and some of the other studies that also involve multiple jurisdictions. So thank you very much for organizing this meeting. As Barry mentioned, I'm going to talk a little bit about the corridor advisory committees that DOT has been working very hard on forming over the last couple of months. So Glenn talked a bit about the functional master plan and the process that led up to adoption of the functional master plan. And one of the things when County Council approved the plan, they said was that there had to be a public engagement process. So the stakeholders of these corridors where the BRT would be operating had to be actively involved in the planning stages. So that is what DOT has been working very hard on over the last few months, along with our input from our steering committee and input from a number of residents and stakeholders along the corridor who have helped with input into the process. I know we're primarily talking about 355 tonight, but there are actually 4 corridors that are under study right now. And these 4 corridors are broken into 7 advisory committees. So we have the Maryland 355 corridor, which is broken in terms of the advisory committee into a north and a south corridor at Rockville Metro Station. And then we have the US 29 corridor, which runs from Burtonsville down to Silver Spring and is broken at New Hampshire Avenue. We've got the 97, and this is just 97 North, so it runs from Olney down to Wheaton, broken at Connecticut Avenue for the purposes of the advisory committees. And then the Maryland 586 Beers Mill Road, which runs from provides the east-west connection between Rockville Metro and Wheaton Metro, and that's the one corridor that just has one committee. So the mission of the corridor advisory committees, we really are looking to provide stakeholders, residents, businesses along these corridors to provide input into the planning and design process. And this will allow us to address potential community impacts by getting the input from the stakeholders. And our hope is that the members of the committees will actually help to educate other members of the community, help build consensus within their community, and really be messengers back to their respective communities to help spread the message about what BRT is, what's coming, what the benefits are. So they're really going to be key, in terms of helping us communicate with the larger community. In terms of how we've been recruiting members for these advisory committees, we've actually had a very robust outreach effort that we've embarked upon. We've had flyers distributed in county libraries, offices. The state actually helped us with a mailing of about 85,000 mailings out to residents and businesses along all of the corridors. So that reached many, many people. We've been using online methods for getting things out. I've been doing what I call my BRT Roadshow, where I go out to numerous civic organizations and give a presentation kind of similar to what I'm giving tonight. We have been working with the regional service center directors, the transportation management districts, many other organizations who have helped us. The cities have helped us distribute information. We had space on the Montgomery Aldea show, which is a radio show. We actually put ads in a number of ethnic newspapers to try to reach some of the various ethnic populations along these corridors. So we've really tried. I like to say if we were to not get anybody on these committees, it's not because they haven't heard about it, because everybody has certainly heard about these at this point. So just a little bit about how the makeup of these committees and how they will function. Each committee can have up to 40 members, and this is broken up in basically two categories. Up to 30 of the members are direct stakeholders, so those are residents and businesses that are located directly on the corridor. And then we have a space for up to 10 at-large representatives. So these are folks that may not live or work directly on the corridor, but they still have an interest, for one reason or another. Maybe they travel the corridor even though they don't live or work directly on it. So we have this sort of 3-to-1 ratio of direct stakeholders to indirect stakeholders that make up the committees. In terms of how the committee members will be selected, and this is particularly applicable, I would say, to the at-large membership. We will prioritize nominees who reside or work in close geographic proximity to the corridors, because those are the folks that are most likely to experience the largest degree of impact from this project. We're looking for folks that use transit frequently and or use the roads frequently. So we want a good mix of people who are transit riders and also drivers along the corridor. We also want diversity. We would like to have small businesses, large businesses, so we want to make sure we have as much diversity as possible. And we are also prioritizing nominees who represent larger residential subdivisions, larger community organizations. So, if we have somebody who comes in and they represent a neighborhood of 600 homes versus somebody who is, within a smaller community, we might be more likely to give preference to the person who's representing more people. In terms of the operations, we expect that the committees will meet about every 2 to 3 months. We'd initially thought it would be quarterly, but we're realizing it may need to be a little bit more frequently than that. We have a lot of material to cover in a short amount of time with these committees, so it's likely to be, probably every 2 months. Members will serve without term limits, so as long as the committee is going on, we're not going to kick any members off. They can stay on as long as they would like. We do expect them to attend all meetings, so there's a level of commitment that we're expecting from the members of these committees, and that's because it's really hard if people start missing meetings. It's really hard to constantly be going back and trying to get people up to speed. So we do want some commitment in terms of attendance, and we expect these committees to continue to exist as long as the project is funded and active. So the Aries project, is currently a 2-year project, but certainly we hope that there will be additional work after those 2 years. So these committees would continue as long as there is work in the corridor. So some next steps. Nominations were due to civics, and one point I didn't make here. The residents are actually being selected by civic organizations, so we're asking, homeowners associations, renters associations, to select one representative to serve on the committee for them. and businesses are actually being selected by chambers of commerce. So nominations were due to the civic organizations and the chambers on November 21st. And then this Friday, we're asking for the nominations from those organizations. To date, we've actually received several hundred nominations ourselves, so, and we're expecting more to come from the civics and the chambers, so we have gotten pretty good response, as far as advisory committees go. We hope to finalize the member selection in December, possibly early to mid-January, with a kickoff meeting mid-February, and then we'll just go every 2 to 3 months onward from that point. And so one last point I wanted to make, we've been really focused on the corridor advisory committees, and that's because, it's been quite a bit of effort to get that up and going. But the CACs are really part of a larger engagement strategy that we're trying to develop. I mean, we know that State Highway will be conducting other public meetings throughout the study process. We also want to, look at expanding our reach into the community through not just traditional public meetings, but maybe other, non-traditional online ways to engage the community online through surveys or crowdsourcing or that sort of thing. So we're going to look into those sorts of things. And certainly the partnering that we're talking about tonight with the municipalities, with advocacy groups who support, the bus rapid transit projects are going to be very important in continuing to engage the community. So we really very much appreciate all of the work that those groups are doing to help us with this project. With that, all for me.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. We are right on time, and I am amazed that we are, but I thank you all very much for that. And
the train is running on time. That's a good thing.
That's
Yeah, there
great.
you go.
And
The
now's the
buses,
time in the
yes,
meeting that
pardon.
we set aside to have an actual discussion among all of us. And I'll start it off, Councilmember President.
Can I be heard? There we go. Well, Mayor Newton, thank you for hosting this, and I'm very, very impressed with seeing all of these presentations in one place at one time. I think a lot of excellent work has been done, more than I really had appreciated prior. And for anyone who's watching this at home, I think it's a very impressive example of early collaboration. And I respect very much the fact that although this discussion was sort of initiated at the county level, the municipalities have their own planning and zoning authority and their own planning departments. It is clear to me, as positive and as impressive as this is, before too long we're going to have to centralize the discussion. And we're sort of, the cliche is that you're building the plane as you're flying it. Overlaid on top of all of these different discussions, the city of Gaithersburg's discussion, the city of Rockville's discussion, the county's discussion, the state's discussion, is this proposal for a new transit authority, which presumably would be one transit authority for the county and Rockville and Gaithersburg. So that's really more of an observation than a question. It just seems to me that as we begin to develop trust and as we begin to harmonize all of these discussions, before too long, it's going to have to be one discussion. But I'm very positively impressed with all of the preparation that has led to this discussion, and I'm very grateful to the city of Rockville for convening all of us.
Well, thank you, and I agree. I think we all do. That's one reason for coming together, is to get this all on the same page. And I think it's incredible that we all were able to get on one group with the PowerPoints. I mean, that just shows the collaboration right there. So it's a good thing, and I agree with you. And I was interested to hear on Monday the county executive's proposal for the Transit Authority, and I think that's something we're all going to have to come together and discuss. So, yeah, thank you. Councilmember Berliner.
You want to go around and get Gaithersburg or Rockville representatives. I don't want our county or our county council to dominate this
No,
conversation.
you had your hand up. You're welcome.
So I too am very impressed with this and just so pleased at how all three jurisdictions are so enthusiastic about BRT and how all three jurisdictions recognize how central it is to our future for the congestion, for environment, for quality of life, for economic development, for all those reasons. This has to happen. And as the county executive observed, it has to happen quickly. So I say to our state SHA representative that there was part of me that was dying as I heard you go through the various steps of this process. And I would ask you to partner with us in coming up with a process that actually can bring about this critically important process and project in a time frame that is reasonable. And for me, that's a 4-year process. So from my perspective, if we do not start at the end point as to when we want to see construction begin, this process will just add, and add. And I feel it has to be driven by the sense of urgency that I think all 3 jurisdictions feel with respect to this, that I hope our state appreciates how important it is for our state's competitiveness, for our state's economic development. And so I don't know to what extent you are in a position to talk about how we can accelerate this process, but from my perspective, that is literally the most important part of this conversation, to get this done.
No,
No, I think, no, it's, no, definitely we understand your concern, and you know, what we'll do is we'll do the best we can as we move through this corridor planning process there to basically, you know, just evaluate what strategies there are as far as moving projects through the development process there. So, you know, we definitely look forward to basically looking, you know, we're working hand in hand with Rockville and Gaithersburg and Montgomery County Department of Transportation, and of course the citizen advisory groups to be able to figure out what's most important to everybody in Montgomery County.
Thank you. Councilmember Elrich.
So I want to thank the 2 jurisdictions, Rockville and Gaithersburg, for what you laid out today. And we've been talking about this with your councils for a little while now, and it's just really gratifying to see the discussions having borne this kind of fruit. Even Rockville with the BRT down the center and not on the side. I mean, that's not insignificant. And I've encouraged you all to work together because these are your communities this is going to go through, and it makes a lot of sense for you to play a major role in looking at how the lines traverse these areas, and you have probably greater familiarity with that than anybody. So I really appreciate what you've done. I would lend my voice to Roger's comments, but I do think 2 years is too long, and partly because I think you have really a finite number of options. And I would suggest also that you're not going to find segments that you can prioritize over other segments. I mean, this is really an interconnected thing. It doesn't make any sense to start in Clarksburg and die someplace else. It doesn't make any sense to go from Gaithersburg to Rockville. You really do have to approach it as a whole. I think that's where the greatest benefit, and that's where you get your ridership from. So I think that's critically important. When I started on this adventure, I met with other people who had actually done these things, because I saw what other people had done, but I never actually had done anything like this. And I asked what guided other people in making decisions. And the one thing that has always stuck with me is the advice I got from Stefan Vigiano. I think that's how you pronounce his name. He was with the system in Eugene, Oregon. He now works for Parsons Brinkerhoff. He did work for Parsons Brinkerhoff. But his comment when I asked him how they managed to bring in a project at a relatively low price and in a relatively rapid time frame was that instead of going to the consultant and saying, design me a system from point A to point B, they did a lot of work in advance and then told Parsons Brinkerhoff what to design. And they'd already looked at what the bottlenecks were, and they'd already decided how they wanted the bottlenecks treated. So, for example, he said, if we had a right-of-way bottleneck or we had an environmental bottleneck, well, we weren't buying any extra land, and we weren't building any bridges, so we need you to look at the viability of single tracking. And Eugene's one of the first places that did, single tracking in places to get through bottlenecks. And I think it's really important to be willing to look at single tracking. I think, this council has just made a major step with the road code to propose narrowing the lane widths in our more urban areas to 10 feet. And I'll just do a simple math situation for you. Going on 355 through some of the most congested areas, 6 lanes times 2 feet is 12 feet, and that's enough for a single reversible lane. So where you've got lanes already, if you can trim the lanes, you can pick up space where no space appears right now. So if you only look at the existing layout of lanes, you won't find opportunities. But if you look at some of the stuff that we've talked about doing ourselves in the county, you'll find space. And I would encourage you all to look at that. Our goal was to slow things down through the urban areas, and this would accomplish 2 goals. It would slow things down through the more dense areas, but it would give you space without having to acquire right-of-way. And I know that the acquisition of right-of-way is often the financial bottleneck to a lot of these projects. So I hope we have a flexible approach in doing this, and I hope that when we get to the point where we're dealing with consultants, that we're in a position of telling people more what we want and put people to work designing what we want rather than asking people to come up with designs for us, because I think that route will result in a very expensive and a very challenging system to put forward. And I think there are models of systems that have been built for numbers that are far less than some of the systems that are being proposed in Maryland right now. And I think there's something to be learned from that.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Spiegel.
Thank you. Thank you again to the City of Rockville for hosting this. I just want to piggyback off of what Councilmember Elrich just said about the holistic nature of this project, and take the opportunity to publicly thank the county for prioritizing the 355 northern portion of the route as part of the initial study area. As many of you may know, a year and a half ago, as initial discussions were underway about which routes were going to be prioritized for the study area, it wasn't entirely clear at that point that 355 North would be included at all. And as you saw from the very last slide in the City of Gaithersburg's presentation tonight, we did advocate to keep that included, and we thank the county for including that, because as you look at the maps that have been presented and you think about what this project is designed to address and the way it's designed to serve in a holistic manner the connections and the communities, it is very important that both the northern and southern portions of 355 be included. So I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank the county for doing that.
Thank you. Councilmember Florine.
Thanks. I just wanted to comment that we did not do this in an isolated fashion. The corridor analysis is not just transit. It's based on land use. And you're seeing what's going on down in the White Flint area. And I'm glad that the state is looking at the traffic and ridership analysis as part of its evaluation, because I think that's very important. Our numbers were based, as I recall, in 2045 development build-out. And I would urge you, because I know the city is, you're still working on your Rockville Pike plan, and I guess the city of Gaithersburg is also doing that as well. So the whole, for us at least to a large degree, the issue of BRT is not based on the way things are today, but on the way we anticipate that development will occur, and we will encourage it to occur in the future. So I just wanted to make that point. It is a land use based effort that drove a lot of this. I'm one of the more anxious members of the council on this score than most of my colleagues, but it is tied to rather significant development expectations on the corridor. And I would urge you to keep that in mind as you do your own community work on this part. I know it's hard. It's not easy. It worked very well in the White Flint area. And as you know, the county part of 355 is planned for very dense development. You're just seeing a part of it right now. But we would anticipate, and I would expect that the state will will be looking at what the cities are also planning along this corridor as part of its analysis of the ridership, of course, because that's all going to be related to how we pay for all this at the end of the day. It's not going to be free, of course, and depending upon what the options are, we don't know really what it's likely to cost, but we know it will not be free. It will have a lot of impacts on existing communities' expectations as to how traffic's going to flow and how this is going to work for them as well. And that will be that's why the CAC part is so important. And so I'm glad that so many people have sent their names in. That's really good. That was very important to us as we worked through this, because we heard from many communities, less actually on 355 than over on 29 in other parts of the county, where there was significant anxiety about how exactly this would work. I mean, that's how I think when I drive up and down the pike every day, and I think to myself, now exactly how is this going to work? And that's the kind of community engagement that we hope will add to the analysis and the value of this whole effort. So I just wanted to draw those points to your attention, because those are things that the county has no influence over. Of course, we've done our bit in terms of the land use planning, but it will be up to you to look at your bit and how this all fits as you travel up the pike.
Right, thank you. Councilmember Sesma.
Well, thank you for bringing that up. We describe in our own report that this is a game changer for us, and that means, what the future of the corridor is through the center of the city, and certainly what happens there depends a lot on the use of transit, getting people out of their cars, getting them to the places they need to go, whether it's work or home, whether it's people coming to the city to work, to Rockville, to Gaithersburg, or leaving those residential areas that are going to develop around these activity centers, and where we've already approved some of that. So it's a game changer. I think that the best thing that we can say so far is that the tremendous inertia of getting the three jurisdictions to talk to each other about the same topic has already been overcome, and I think that that's already been pointed out. So we're starting way ahead of this game. It was interesting to look at the process and see the fourth bullet there, which is to identify alternatives, and I think it's going to be a pretty short discussion in terms of alternatives. There aren't that many when we're talking about 355. It's either going to be in the middle of the street of the highway, of the route, or it's going to be on one side or the other, or both, or it's going to be one lane or two lanes. So those are the alternatives that I see, but I certainly think what is going to bring other people to the table, residents and businesses, is when we start to look at the local impacts and see how their lives might be changed, might be improved, or might force a reconsideration for some of those folks about where they live, how they live, where they work, etc. But I think that if we can, there is a great sense of urgency. It's been urgent for us for a long time to get this moving. So I agree that we need to move it forward as quickly as possible. And one way is to work through these alternatives pretty quickly. Like I said, that shouldn't be that long a conversation with the public or with the jurisdictions. So the most challenging thing is where are the choke points. I think we've identified the Mixing Bowl and the Father Cuddy Bridge in Gaithersburg, the Mixing Bowl in Rockville. Again, if it's a single lane, how do we where do we put those the passing the areas where the trains reflex there, the RTVs are able to pass each other safely without causing other congestion in the flow of traffic. So those are what I think that the things that we're going to be looking at. Well, I'll be looking at first and looking for good solutions. So.
Thank you. Councilmember Driscoll.
Thank you. Certainly our planning staff is welcome to talk about how forward-thinking we are, but I really also want to thank Councilmember Elrich for coming to the city several times and presenting his ideas quite a few years ago and introducing the idea to us. We wouldn't have learned about it as soon anyhow if he hadn't made that effort. But I also, and for Councilmember Florine's comments that this is about land use and the future of the corridor, there's an aspect of that that is very real in Gaithersburg and in many other parts of the route. The 355 corridor is a thriving economic engine in one sense or another already. In Gaithersburg, really the CCT corridor is in that part. That is the wealthiest, newest, most educated part of our city. And really having BRT on 355 is a social equity thing, that this is our older part of town. Redevelopment has been limited in part because of lack of transportation alternatives. When you're car dependent, you need a grid of streets. We don't have it. So introducing BRT is really a way to balance the options in different areas of the city, and I think it will bring a lot of opportunities to that corridor that we wouldn't have with some other new innovative transportation. You may not have a lot of applications from people in that section. We don't have civic organizations. I think people were thrown off by the fact they were supposed to be approved by something that doesn't exist in the city. And also these are people that might not be, as used to going to meetings and things like that. We're certainly going to try and encourage more people to participate from in the Gaithersburg city limits. But I hope everyone sees this in that part of the corridor. There's a whole aspect to it that probably doesn't occur as much in other areas along the route.
Very good points. Councilmember Katz, it's a hard one.
Thank you. I understand. Believe me, it's been 2 days. I'm getting there too. I appreciate that.
It's wonderful.
Yeah. I just want to again join the chorus and thank everybody for doing this meeting. And of course, we are proving that in order for this to be effective, we all need to be at the table, literally, with their partners from the other agencies to get things done. And I'm not going to repeat what's already been said, and much I agree with, and I thank everyone for saying it. But I'd just like to make the point that this should not be the only topic that these three groups come together. That we have something called an adequate public facilities ordinance, I believe, that needs to be discussed with each other, so that we can actually get a lot of things solved. Not to in any way say that bus rapid transit is already solved, because it's not. But we need to make sure that we do the other important things as well along with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to say anything? I appreciate a lot of the comments that were, well, I appreciate all of the comments, I apologize, but some really resonated with me, and the economic equity does. One of the questions I wanted to ask Councilmember Florine, has the decision been made at the White Flint area of the width, the right-of-way width?
Yeah, it's in the master plan.
Can you?
I could, Glenn could tell you.
I
the
thought
number
it had
of it.
been.
No, Glenn can't tell you. No, right. Yeah.
So 144? I think, yeah, I think, that's what I thought, that there had been a decision made, I just wasn't clear on what it was, and I think that's in 3 lanes and a double BRT. Okay. I think that's instructive for those of us that are working on
Roger's
planning.
saying it's down the middle. Yeah.
Yes, and I am very glad Rockville is now down the middle as well. That's great. I think one of the things that I've heard from property owners as well as our community is the number of stops that are planned, and there's a little bit of a conflict between a BRT and actually getting people to be able to use a BRT for the reasons that they might be using it. And I think as we go forward, that's a conversation we need to have as well, and make sure we're doing the right method for in there. So I just want to throw that out as a further conversation. And I agree that 355 North may have specific desires that might be a little bit different than what you have in the center of Gaithersburg, what we have in the Rockville corridor right along there. So I think that's something that I hope we can continue to talk about as we go forward with that. Sir.
Sorry, it's 150 feet or as much as 162 of additional spaces needed to be obtained through reservations. So it's a
Super.
right of way.
Thank you very much for pointing that out. Is that on table 6?
It's on table 7.
Table 7.
If you look in the middle of that page, if you look at, say, the section between Hoya Street and Edson Lane.
Terrific.
That would be White Flint.
Super. Thank you very much. Other comments or questions? Councilmember Moore.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do have a question. Well, first, I would like to thank everybody for coming. Especially like to thank the county and the state staff who have worked very closely with Rockville's planners on this. It was a concern of ours up front that we might just get steamrolled in this process, and we've been very, very not surprised, but very pleased by how well the coordination has gone between the different jurisdictions. So really, thank you for that. But we have the CACs and the different plans and so on. I don't have a good feel for when do we start talking about the money? When does when do we start looking for money? When do we get money? And when is there a kind of a no or a go or no go decision made on this? Do we have a feel for what stage in this process we know that?
Good question.
Can I weigh in?
Mr. Orland, please. Thank you.
Over my opinion, which is, I don't think you should really talk too much about the money until we know what it is that you're talking about building and how much it's going to cost. At least a rough idea is what it's going to cost. I think we will have a rough idea what it's going to cost at the end of this first process, about a year, year and a half.
Okay.
Great. Good question. Yes, sir. Councilmember Rafata.
I've been working on this for a long time at Gaithersburg, and it's really good we're all together, but there's some big issues, and Tom just hit it, and Kathy said something that was also very important on this particular issue, is we can talk about this all day long, but we have 3 projects that are working that we need to pay for. We have the CCT, and we have the BRT, not to mention schools and running the government. So there's a lot of money going around, and every time you talk to somebody, there's not enough money to be done. You start, bringing taxes in and stuff like that, and you're going to lose a lot of interest in this. So we really need to take a long look at when are we actually going to start it, how are we going to pay for it, and remember, the CCT and the BRT are 2 separate entities. They do different things, and that was Kathy brought up. One is that we want people to come down the 355 corridor, get out of their car, go down, go shopping, eat dinner, come home. So it means we have to have stops. We have to have all those things that are pertinent to people who are just going to ride a fast bus. The CCT obviously is to get traffic down county and up county. So, but both of those have to be paid for. Are they going to be run concurrently? And I'm throwing these out just for thought processes. I don't have an opinion on them yet. I haven't studied them long enough. But how are we going to do it? Are we going to do that concurrently? Are we going to get all the money for both of them at the same time? How does that interrupt traffic? Because a lot of those, that go through Gaithersburg, we have 2 major corridors going through there with a lot of construction. So there's a lot of very serious things we have to do. I think Mike said it, forget about the alternatives. I mean, that's a minor thing because it's going to go down 355. So we need to make sure that we're concentrating on the really important issues. Does the state, does the county, does Rockville, does Gaithersburg, how are they going to participate monetarily? And in the stuff that we're doing now, we have to make sure that we have to look forward to doing the right-of-way, because that's the whole key to the thing. I mean, I'm looking at some numbers here, and the minimum that we can get away with is about 160 feet to do it properly. Now, the single tracking and so forth like that, like they were saying, those are alternatives, but single tracking takes out maybe 10, 12, 15 feet, and that brings it down to 145, and most of the places have 120 feet. So we still have some major issues. So we need to keep in touch and get this off the road on the real critical decisions.
Thank you, I agree. All right, I'm looking for hands. No. All right. Well, I will just say thank you to everybody, and Mr. Street, thank you very much for stepping in for the county executive. You did a great job.
Sorry
And
you couldn't be here tonight.
No, we totally understand with the schedule he keeps. And thank you to all the council members and Mayor Ashman and your council, and to all of Rockville's council members and staff. Thank you very much for making this a priority tonight. And I think it'd be a great idea if we did this again in the not too distant future, but to keep this kind of a conversation going. That's a great idea. Super. All right. Thanks,
Excellent.
everybody.
Thank you.